with master's degrees from the diaspora and engaging them in the Armenian government. While initially we had planned on funding 20 such individuals, it was clear that there was a much greater need from the Armenian government because we had in excess of 85 requests from the Armenian government for such professionals. And we had a huge excess of applicants. We had over 800 applicants that applied for these 20 positions. So now we're sort of shuffling the funds around and we're going to fund upwards of 100 fellows this year. I think the influx of 100 well-educated professionals from the diaspora into the Armenian governance system is going to have a serious impact in the way we do things, in the way we think, and in the speed with which things move forward. Another, I know my time is quite limited, but another program that we're piloting is Kyle Depitun program, but only online. We're going to do it probably in the month of August, and thereby, again, provide an online platform for children to stay connected with Armenia since we can't do it physically, and also alleviate the horrible pressure that the parents are under because kids are home constantly and they need to be kept busy. And hopefully this is a constructive way to engage them and keep them out of trouble.
Thank you very much. That's a perfect segue for me to actually ask about online education and bounce that question over to Ms. Gordunian. AGBU has been very much on the forefront of providing, before COVID, online education tools to the diaspora. I'm curious, what's the extent to which COVID has pushed that further in terms of having your online platforms being used more often, or are you perhaps providing a different kind of educational material to the diaspora in this era?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for the invitation. And yes, indeed, COVID has, changed the situation. And I would like to illustrate that with two examples, if you don't mind. So you are probably familiar with the AGBU online learning program, the Armenian Virtual College, named AVC, which was set up 10 years ago to help Armenians around the world access quality learning courses on the Armenian language for both Western and Eastern Armenian, for literature, history, and related topics. This existed already 10 years ago. We added the chess included in the platform a few years ago in reflection of the Armenian government priorities. The strategic shift was already planned before COVID crisis, but the crisis has demonstrated how relevant this shift is and accelerated the implementation. So in April this year, the AVC launched the Learning Zone. This is a diversified learning experience focused on general knowledge of the Armenian world, combining self-education based on daily activities with opportunities to live communication and discussions. In response to the call of the Ministry of Education, Science, Culture and Sport of Armenia to expand the opportunities for online education, AVC has launched multiple editions of a free AVC Learning Zone. So 2 editions were completed already. The third one is ongoing, and it's already around 800 participants who benefit from this free learning program. There is another detail here which is very important in terms of shifting the content of the e-learnings. The first step that was already set in motion before the crisis started using the AVC platform to teach business skills as part of the Empower Her project. Empower Her project is a project run by AGBU Armenia that helps women entrepreneurs set up and grow their business in Armenia. Through the platform, the organization teaches a whole range of skills, from MS Excel, business ethics, accounting, legal, and etc. Beyond this also, AGBU plans to provide vocational skills with the AVC platform. We hope to start with coding skills allowing all young people in Armenia to learn coding online. And lastly, with AVC, we hope to be able to provide a service to ordinary school, meaning for the teachers, the Armenian teachers, help them prepare the next generation in the STEM subject. So this is the first example of everything which were accelerated and developed during COVID. The second example is related to the Boris program. We also like to share this, the impact of COVID on our way of working globally. We have put digitalization and agility from the start in our AGBU Boris program. The Boris Leadership Development Program is a professional level leadership program tailored for talented young Armenians, enabling them to confront and transcend the challenges of their personal, professional, community, and public lives. The purpose is to create the leaders who will make a difference for their society and for the global Armenian nation. Showing leadership in uncertain times is a core of Boris. So we were well prepared for COVID due to the fact that we started building an online platform for leadership development to accompany the in-class learning with a virtual component. The creation of www.leadership.am was started beginning of 2019 after our team met with President Armen Sarkisian in Yerevan. A need for a virtual platform was articulated to bring human capital throughout the global Armenian nation together. We swiftly converted the first seminar, which was intended for April in Brussels, into launching the leadership platform for the Boris 2020 cohort. The result was that we were able to provide high quality content on the topic of leadership to the Boris cohort from leaders from renowned companies such as Walt Disney, Starbucks, and Vogue. Digitalization and agile end-to-end delivery of project has been our strategic goal. The COVID situation has accelerated it, execution and high speed. So I welcome you to visit the leadership platform to read more about the AGBU Boris program and to be part of this online-offline leadership development journey. We will hold an online webinar entitled Leading Self, Others, and Organization with some of the Armenian world's luminaries, including Ruben Vartanian. Thank you, Ruben, for being part of this, but also Ari Libarikian, Ani Kharajian, and Armen Ovanesov. So please visit the site leadership.am to register. So in conclusion to your question, I think that we can say that the move towards online leadership was already underway before March 2020. The recent crisis has shown us that this movement, which we knew to be necessary, was in fact also urgent and inevitable. Hopefully AGBU is in the mood of achieving this like others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll just take the opportunity to ask how the French Armenian community is doing in terms of COVID. What is, how are you doing? How is the French Armenian? I know there are so many also French Armenian physicians on the front lines. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an understanding of how the French Armenian community is doing.
Yes, thank you for asking. So overall, as you may know, France is in a good shape now because the peak is done for a few weeks. The country is open now. It's not 100% normal life, obviously. Not everybody could go back to work and normal life, but we are doing better every day and it seems to be stable. We were AGBU, like other Armenian diaspora organization, were very worried about the situation for our people here. So we were very open and in contact with a lot of people. I would say that fortunately, in terms of, I would say, medical situation, we didn't have big issues. You know that the French medical situation is strong. People go for free in hospital, and we didn't heard, of course, we had some loss, unfortunately, but we didn't had big issue of people not being able to be treated or anything like that. So we were very concentrated on the medical side, which was okay. In some of smaller town, not in Paris, but in some other towns, some people were, of course, implemented some help for some poor people, and we did it also in Paris, but it was more or less okay. But again, nothing really hard to say here. In fact, now we are preparing ourselves for not really yet the second wave of COVID, but maybe the economical impact of all this. Because as everywhere, we may expect some work, people losing work and having some newly economic issues. And with this, we want to be aware and to be ready to help here. So this is what we are preparing in France with several other associations, and especially with the, the CSAF, who is the coordinating body of all associations in France.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you very much. And with that, let's go to the United States and Ambassador Nersessian, if you can give us a little bit of an idea of how things are there in the US as it relates to two topics. I think I'll just throw both out now. The perspective of the US Armenian community, diaspora Armenians in the US, and COVID, as well as maybe you can also comment in general how the COVID era has affected your work as it relates to diplomacy and diplomatic relations.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and welcome everybody from Washington, D.C. I'm really glad to join this great panel and to share my perspective from here, from Washington. And of course, this is very, very important times. The COVID crisis affected us, everybody. And our embassy here in Washington, since the outbreak of the COVID, has been intensively involved both with our community and with American authorities in organizing our work in this circumstances, in this crisis situation. And this was yet another opportunity for all of us to mobilize our resources, to concentrate and to focus our work on this in this situation. We were just before the, when I talk here often, to the colleagues and friends and Armenian American community members, it was, of course, we knew the news that were coming in February, in March, but nobody would have expected that this was the scale here in the United States, was going to be to that extent. We were busy, and Armenian American community, and not only Armenian American community, supported us to organize a big concert here in Washington at the Washington Cathedral. That was the last large public event that we had, and it was on March 4th, and right after that, we discovered ourselves in a completely new mode, in a completely new situation when the pandemic started to spread. And our embassy organized its work in such a way that we maintained 99% of our activities, both from the office and from home, fulfilling our mission, both, first of all, continuing Armenian-American relations, developing our daily work with American institutions, American government institutions, with executive, with the legislative, but also maintaining on a daily basis our contacts with the Armenian American community. I have been in touch with, and both here and West Coast, and our Consulate General in West Coast has been similarly involved with the community and local authorities in California and other states in the West Coast. But I've been in touch on a daily basis with the primate and the prelate and the diocese and prelacy, and Armenian American community organizations, the leadership and the members. We have organized 2 big conference calls with Yerevan, with the community leadership and Deputy Prime Ministers Avignon and Foreign Minister Natsaganyan to discuss the needs that Armenia has. And also here in the United States, between East Coast and West Coast leadership, our embassy and Consulate General in Los Angeles organized the call to see what are the needs in Armenia, what is the situation, and also what are the needs here in the community, to what extent the community has been affected. So we have been in close contact in this and trying to address the issues. The embassy has been also heavily involved and busy with the organization of the assistance for the return of Armenian citizens to Armenia. This has been, and also Consulate General from Los Angeles, we have organized from East Coast more than, the return of more than 150 of our citizens, including 37 students and 35 children. And by the way, the children, they were, this was a unique case that they were in 19 US states. These were the children in the FLEX program organized by the American consuls. So we worked with the American consuls and the Georgian embassy here in Washington. This was a good demonstration of cooperation on a concrete issue to organize the return of 37 children. It was very difficult. Their parents were very, anxious in Armenia, and we really succeeded. It was an excellent cooperation with Georgian embassy and American consuls and American government here to organize the return, and through also the help of our honorary consul, Oscar Petrosian in Chicago, Armenian American community, right after my call in Chicago, just during several hours, got organized, went to the airport, organized everything for the children. So that was a very good example how we could mobilize our resources to return the 35 children to Armenia. But also many other projects that we have been busy. Students from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, from Iowa, several groups of students that we have assisted, we have tried, and our Consulate General in Los Angeles has assisted in return of more than 350 citizens of the Republic of Armenia. So this has been a part of only a small part of our activities, but also we have been engaged with American authorities, as I said, in the organization of the American assistance projects to the Republic of Armenia. And of course, we're thankful for the more than $5.4 million US dollars worth assistance program post-COVID that was allocated generously by the US government to Armenia. So this was yet another demonstration of American generosity and extending the helping hand to Armenia in the middle of this crisis. Along with that, of course, the embassy has participated and has done its own contribution to the very beautiful initiative of the Armenian American community of reaching out to the American families in need in this COVID situation. That was allocation of meals that originally the intent was 1.5 million, symbolic number coinciding with the number of Armenian genocide victims, but then it reached more than 6.5 million, if I'm not mistaken. So the embassy around April 24th has contributed and called upon the community to actively participate in this wonderful initiative to also demonstrate Armenian American communities gratitude towards the American people and American government to reach out as Armenian community here in the United States. So these were most of the priorities we have been involved. But of course, this is a very challenging situation for us. Talking about today's topic, nation under lockdown, borderless through diaspora. I think we have, as Armenian people, as Armenian government and Armenian diaspora, to do this analysis. And I thank you for this good opportunity to talk between ourselves. What are our tasks? What are we facing? What are the challenges? Armenia is in the middle of very difficult times these days. The government is doing its utmost to address the situation and to overcome as soon as possible the crisis, and to address the economic impact, the economic tasks that are deriving. So we have, and this was also a chance for us to mobilize, like during the time of the earthquake, Spitak earthquake in Armenia, or during the time of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. The diaspora immediately started to channel its assistance to Armenia, and I thank particularly here to Armenian American community and all our diaspora communities that have not hesitated for a second. I'm sure Commissioner Mr. Sinanian has the entire data and the of the situation and of the diaspora's help to Armenia during this situation. But this is an opportunity. We got to look at this, as Prime Minister Pashinyan suggests, not only as a challenge, this virus, the coronavirus crisis, but also as an opportunity for Armenia diaspora situation. For Armenia diaspora, we have worldwide diasporas that have the accumulated experience, the institutional memory accumulated, so we can utilize this through, and including through these conference calls. We discovered ourselves in the world. I, for instance, didn't know before the coronavirus that the Zoom conferences would have allowed us this opportunity to meet right during several hours. You can schedule, you meet online, you do the discussions. It's very effective, by the way. Of course, this cannot substitute to the face-to-face meetings, especially in diplomacy. This is very challenging for diplomats to conduct their daily activity, because diplomacy has its own nuances, has its own sensitivities, the issues of confidentiality, but we somehow got adapted to this. So for the Armenia and this diaspora, this is a new opportunity as well, to try to do, as the commissioner just explained. So most of the projects luckily didn't suffer. We continue these things online, we continue these things through Zoom conferences. So we need to understand how we can do, because we don't know how long this is going to continue. We wish, of course, that our compatriot Nubar Afeyan's Moderna company registers the quickest and the most successful, becomes the most successful vaccine and helps the people here in America and worldwide and our compatriots. But we don't know how long this situation is going to continue. Therefore, we need to adapt a long-term strategy, how to organize Armenia, diaspora, Artsakh, worldwide, our communities in the situation of crisis. And by crisis, I don't mean only pandemic. It seems the world has entered the dangerous water of all kinds of crises, be it international tensions, be it conflicts that unfortunately these days we're witnessing in our neighboring regions, the evolution of certain conflicts that are concerning us. So we need to organize our lives in these new conditions, and I think this is a very good opportunity to discuss. The technology is only one aspect, but we need to think of what else we can do so that our Armenia diaspora community activities do not suffer. This is a challenge, but the more important challenge is, how we're going to organize diaspora's involvement and engagement, and not only help, but engagement in Armenia post-COVID. How, in the light of the absence of flights, in the light of the absence of normal communications that existed before the pandemic, how we're going to organize all of this. Armenia is going to be in need of a, post-COVID rehabilitation, and we need to address this challenge, how to better organize. So with this, I would like to conclude, but I would be happy to engage in the question and answer. And I thank all of the panelists.
Thank you.
Looking forward
Thank you,
to
Ambassador.
Thank you.
It's a perfect opportunity to move to Ruben Vartanian as we're discussing sort of post-COVID rehabilitation. Ruben, as I was preparing for this webinar, I was looking again at all of the work IDEA Foundation has done in the country and the incredible work, especially as it relates to tourism infrastructure that has been done down south in Dilijan, Gyumri, all over. How are you thinking about the socioeconomic projects, the social entrepreneurship projects that you have undertaken in the country in this post-COVID era? Can we think about this as an opportunity? How are you thinking about it?
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everybody. We are connected in different part of the world, and really it's amazing to use this technology opportunity to talk with the people in different part of the world. I was Tamada, one of the online wedding. It was funny experience when I was managing 200 people sitting in online in 18 countries, and we've been talking toast and try to celebrate the wedding, which people decide not to postpone because they've been already organizing it, everything. And it was interesting to see the plus and minus of the technology. But coming back to your point, I think it's very challenging for not only tourists, but for small countries in general, because if we're looking what's happening now in a post-COVID world, the countries with self-sustainability becoming more attractive, because you can see the big countries benefiting to be now big to keep their own activities in internal tourism or economic development without being dependent from export or import. That's why I think for all small countries, not only for Armenia, and you know, in our research what we've been doing the last 20 years, we always use Armenia as like example for other countries, because Armenia not alone. We have a worldwide around 35 countries our size who are facing some similar challenges about how to be attractive for donors, how to be attractive for investors, how to make tourism or whatever other industry development proper to be attractive for the big flow of the money or people or projects. And I think the COVID pushed us in an interesting situation. In one hand, we've been more isolated and we've been now sitting more in our own homes, and we are not only cannot leave our own country, but most of the people have been sitting in on flight. At the same time, our connectivity to the world become better. That's why it is interesting situation when in one hand you are fully isolated, in the other hand you are connected to the world, and your dependability from the world become much better, because before you've been hearing the news about what's happening in China or what's happening in Russia or United States more like from curiosity. Now it's more relevant to your own life. That's why I think the relevance of the global connectivity increased dramatically despite our capacity to travel decreased, in my view. I think, by the way, you need to know most of our projects, which we've been doing in Armenia the last 20 years, this year we will be celebrating Armenia 2020 project 20 years, but we started with Nubar in February 2001. We always had a 35-40% internal tourism. And so I say also it was interesting for Tatev, for example, or Dilijan, it's benefit from becoming attractive, not only for external, but also internal people to travel to see places. And the same in Artsakh, what we've been doing, or in Gyumri, is the idea to make a lot of things, not only for outside people coming to Armenia, but also inside of Armenia to using this infrastructure. I'll say overall, we will, I think, face some challenges of the recovery of the tourism industry, quite long. In the future, it will take much longer time than we're expecting. I think it will be 2-3 years before it will be fully recover. So we need to be ready and be realistic about our capacity to operate without the same flow of people who've been coming to Armenia, especially the last couple of years. And we need to be realistic about overall the travel will become less active overall, because people will be scared, it will take more difficult, it'll be more complicated to travel. So I think it's, in one hand, giving more opportunity to build your own ecosystem internally and to do some projects. Also giving you a chance to use the network of companies and people operating worldwide using the online technology. But I think it's a reality will be not simple for Armenia for the next couple of years. I think it will be quite challenging to keep the same growth of the people who will be coming to Armenia because of the connections with the diaspora connection or just tourist interest to Armenia. But at the same time, I believe what we've been doing with FAST, with the Tourism and Development Foundation, with the Aurora, with all other elements, I can see the more and more interest from young Armenians to be engaged more to the Armenian world, and we need to use this momentum also to better explain our uniqueness. One thing I want to share, which is not relevant to your question, but I think it's very important. I looked the numbers before this meeting, and I found now interesting correlations why Armenian diaspora been always so very well known in the world, and how why it was so relative to others was more important, or always more people will talk about us. And I will tell you the numbers. It's overall we're living 7.8 billion people living in the planet. and Armenians only 10 million. But if you look diaspora, more or less people calculate it is around 500 million maximum, realistically 200 million. And we're talking about 5 to 8 million Armenian diaspora. That's why, from diaspora point of view, Armenians diaspora, for example, the Chinese or Indian diaspora is a 50 million people, Russian diaspora 25 million people. That's why our relevance to the list number is much higher compared relevance to the overall population. It's the same if you look historically in our book that we wrote with Nune Alikan and with the Nubar Afian at Crossroads. Historically, Armenian population in the 1st century BC and after was around 10 million, whereas the Mediterranean people was living in this area was 200 million people. It's by basically we've been relevantly the same 200 million to 10 million, like now diaspora to other diasporas. That's why I think we can benefit from this. We can really use our long expertise and knowledge about how to organize so much better than many others. Which I think will be good to us to use this momentum to share, to show the best example how we can use this, maximize the efficiency of the network.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ruben. You know, I have a bunch of other questions as well, but I'm seeing so many questions also here in the chat from our members of the audience. So maybe rather than ask my questions, I'm going to go over here and read the chat questions. And I'll just use the last one since it's about tourism and it's specifically to Ruben. The question is, Mr. Vartanyan, how long do you think the recovery, how long do you think it'll take to recover in the tourism sphere?
I don't know. It depends how deep will be the crisis. Nobody knows what will happen with that. And we just need to understand we will live in new reality. It's not about the crisis and then when the crisis will be recovered. We are living in new realities. The online will become a bigger part of our life. I think we need to be also realistic with the economic crisis is not started yet. We don't see yet what's happening after this 3 months of shutting down your country economy. So I will say we need to be careful about any predictions. We need to be careful about any rosy expectation that everything will come back very quickly. Despite we saw already in the US market, stock market, for example, recovered was quite quickly and the oil price went back quite quickly. But I think it's more like waves, which will go down again because we can see social instability. We can see the more and more serious results coming out of the big corporation losing money and big challenges facing in different parts of the world. And I think the social instability and political instability will grow up. So I will be quite cautious about being very optimistic about recovery timing. And I will say we need to be expecting like a couple of years at least.
Okay. All right. That's fair. I'm going to just pick some of these questions because there's way too many here, but maybe this is for everyone, but perhaps specifically to the High Commissioner as well as the Ambassador. Could you talk a little bit about some key successes for the US diaspora in fighting against the current situation? Maybe some examples of successes where diaspora has marked some success, as well as any challenges that you want to talk about in particular diaspora communities.
Mr. Ambassador, shall I? You know, one thing that's very particular about this crisis that was not in place during the previous crises that Armenia has undergone, you know, the Artsakh war and the earthquake, is that the entire world is in crisis. So it's not that Armenia is in crisis and the diaspora is doing relatively well and they can step in at any time. The diaspora, because this is a worldwide phenomenon, is also experiencing this in some way or form. In fact, some of our communities are experiencing a far worse crisis than what we're experiencing in Armenia. For example, our brethren and our sisters in Lebanon have multiple layers of crisis that they're undergoing. An economic crisis that started before the pandemic, that's been intensified by the pandemic, added on to economic crisis that's going to come as a result of the pandemic, as well as new US sanctions on Syria and its supporters and so on and so forth. That I just gave you one example. Like we can talk about the Iranian Armenian community. I think we're going to see our communities even in Russia being impacted by this economic downturn, right? Like Ruben Vartanyan already mentioned, we're on the beginning end of, we're at the start point of the economic crisis. We haven't really seen it. It's going to be long. It's going to be very harsh. It's going to impact the world and our community. So we have to be mindful about and measure our expectations from the diaspora. We have to be in the mindset that perhaps this is a time when we need to think about helping many of these communities, as opposed to constantly expect that the diaspora is going to come to Armenia's rescue. We may be in the role of the rescuer for the next indefinite future. Having said that, we do have successes. I mean, we have our communities that have mobilized to raise protective equipment and have shipped them to Armenia. Specifically, Sarah, you're very well aware about our LA doctors who, during the very first days of the pandemic, put together an entire metric ton of PPEs that at the time when they were very needed and they were very short supply in Armenia. And literally within a week's time, we received that shipment, which made a difference in the beginning stages of the pandemic. We have our foundations, Gulbenkian, Tufenkian, Izmirlian, our Argentinian community, part of our Argentinian community that mobilized funds, again, during the period when we were in bad need of equipment, protective equipment, and made many of the purchases that the Armenian government made in China for the weekly flights to Armenia possible. So we've had the diaspora step in despite its own serious difficulties. And I think as time goes on, there's going to be a lot of work to do. We have to be measured. We have to understand that this is a marathon. It's not a short distance race. And we have to temper the way we utilize diaspora's resources, because I think we're going to need that help in the long term. And therefore, we have to use it also very consciously, knowing that it's finite, that it's limited. And in fact, we should think of ourselves as the one that needs to be in the role of supporting some diaspora communities. I want to make a quick comment about internal tourism that was mentioned. I've had the fortune of traveling through Armenia in the last few weeks, again, weekend trips. And it's nice to see that our people are internally traveling. I mean, folks aren't cooped up in their cities. They're not cooped up in Yerevan. They are going out on the weekends. They are traveling. Ironically, the hotels in Yerevan are virtually empty. They're servicing the medical teams and the COVID patients, but otherwise no tourists. The hotels outside of Yerevan are actually busy. So they're getting business. And I jokingly say that finally the Armenian people are getting the opportunity to get to know their own homeland, people who actually reside in Armenia. Obviously, I say that in jest, but there is some truth to that.
Very good. Yes, I just wanted to also add, since I was involved in that PPE, those PPE shipments, I will say that we have, as a country, never had a shortage of PPEs. Unlike a lot of other countries, we haven't had a shortage, and a lot of that is also due to our diaspora brothers and sisters who jumped in very early and very fast. Ms. Gordunian, did you have your hand up? Did you want to add something to that? Or, yep, maybe to you and then to the ambassador.
Yeah, just it was a remark and a comment to Mr. Sinanian. Just to say that, in fact, as you said, all diaspora are not in the same situation. Europe, for example, has not the financial potential of the US. On the other side, Europe is in a quite good shape, whether vis-a-vis COVID and also in general. So I just wanted to emphasize that if I may speak about the European diaspora, that we are really eager to increase again our contribution and collaboration with Armenia. We have a lot of young people in Europe. A lot of them, by the way, recently coming from Armenia between 20 years ago. And those people are really committed, you know, to give back and to partner with Armenia. So I guess, again, maybe it's not that financial side, but Europe has a lot of human potential to give and to support Armenia. This is kind of a lot of projects that we are developing in Europe together with the AGBU Armenia are related to this transfer of know-how from Europe to Armenia, to this partnering and, you know, supporting the development of Armenia. This is really important. So please ask us for more. We can do better, definitely.
Thank you. And you know what? I was remiss in not mentioning one of the major contributors to the purchases of the PPEs and payment of the flights from China. And that, of course, is the AGBU. They were a major contributor of the funding, at least the funding that we raised for these purchases. So yes, and I want to thank AGBU particularly because they've been with us every step of the way. We're very grateful for what they do. And I'm sure we'll do great things in the future, not just financially, but also using the human potential, which is enormous in the diaspora, and also enormously underused, deployed, and undervalued in Armenia, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sarah, you wanted me to comment?
Did you want to comment? Yes, please.
Yeah. Just briefly, I think Mr. Sinanian covered most of the ground about Armenian American community, and indeed, I fully agree that, you know, our communities, particularly in the West Coast and also here in East Coast, immediately, you know, reacted to the situation in Armenia, tried to, with their assistance projects, immediately reach out, and all of the organizations, of course, Mr. Sinanian mentioned, I fully agree with AGBU's role and all other organizations. I participated on a weekly basis in a phone calls organized by Armenian Health Professionals Organization, which is a very good network of Armenian medics that they reached out, for instance, upon our call here at the embassy, all those Armenian citizens and non-Armenian citizens, of course, Armenian American community members, who had some medical health issues. So they immediately, this was a good example for us because these people, they don't, charge anything. They just, upon our call, they reach out any Armenian who indicates us their about healthcare needs, and they tried here also to help. And there were many other examples. As I said, the great example of the Armenian American community as a success story, reaching out the American people, because those families in need, because we have never viewed this as a one-way street. Of course, the US has been a great supporter, one of the greatest supporters since Armenia's independence and sovereignty for the, developing the country, deepening democracy, and good government. But also we as Armenian people and the Republic of Armenia and Armenian American community did our best to reach out to people in need here. There was a success story. I believe the meals projects here, it was one of the success stories. But overall, I think, our community, and I also agree with Mr. Sinanian that we need to be equally sensitive and attentive towards all those communities, such as our community in Lebanon or in other Middle Eastern communities. We cannot differentiate because our needs are the community. These are our same people, be it in Armenia, in Los Angeles, Australia, Lebanon, Kazakhstan, or Russia. They're all Armenian people, and we need, in this time of pandemic, to ensure our mechanisms, our national institutions, that we take care about the needs of all these communities worldwide, whatever they are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I just wanted to also note that recently I was in touch with the Foreign Ministry's press secretary. I was just curious to know how many people we have brought back to the country since COVID, and it's upwards of 30,000 people, 36,000 people have been organized to return to the country, and that's quite a feat for 2.5 months that the Republic of Armenia has done. So I just wanted to put that number out there so people know the number of people that have been brought back.
Yes, absolutely. Foreign Minister Menat Sakanyan and Deputy Minister Avet Adonts have been frequently, and also Press Secretary Anna Nahdalian have been frequently communicating with our press about this information. Armenian embassies worldwide and the Foreign Ministry has been, concentrated and mobilized all our forces to cope with the crisis and assist our citizens in return. As you mentioned, more than 35,000 citizens of the Republic of Armenia have been returned through our assistance, and we're happy that we succeeded in most of these cases. Thank you.
Did anybody want to comment on that? Because actually, I think I'm going to use that opportunity to come back perhaps to the High Commissioner, since we have 30 some odd thousand people returning to the country. Is COVID perhaps an opportunity to for repatriation, or is it a hindrance to repatriation? I want to put that out there as well. Whoever would like to talk about it, but maybe first to the High Commissioner.
No, obviously we'd rather COVID didn't happen.
Your connection is bad, Mr. Sinanyan. There's some kind of a sound in your connection. Maybe try again.
I'll go to another speaker until things get fixed here.
Some kind of a speaker. Okay, perhaps anyone would like to talk about perhaps repatriation. I see Ruben unmuted himself.
Yeah, and I think we need to seriously talk about this, because repatriation without job creation is useless. We already knew about this, and we have unemployment in Armenia before 25%. We have official unemployment, where also our productivity is 2.5 times lower compared to Eastern European countries, which means if we increase our productivity, we will more unemployment. If we will not do structural reforms and will not do serious revisiting the entire strategy of the country, what kind of industry we want to develop, what kind of the job creation we can see the future potential of Armenia in the 21st century, I think it will be very dangerous to have a wave of repatriants, people coming and not finding job and living again. We all know how many Syrians Armenian came to Armenia, how many may left, and what's happening is why I think it needs to be very well coordinated between the different elements of what we're doing, because just bringing back people without creating jobs does not make sense. The other point I want to mention for all of our discussion, and I think the High Commissioner knows very well, we're talking about different number from 5 million Armenian diaspora to 7 million Armenian diaspora. When we did our surveys and we were doing our work with Aurora and others, we made the surveys where they found very interesting numbers, which again, not fully scientifically confirmed, but less of 1 million Armenians been in Armenia at least once, which means 4 million Armenians never been in Armenia. When we're talking about Armenian diaspora, we are talking about very different type of the people. People who live in Iran may not consider them a diaspora. They live in their own country. They believe Iranian Armenians, and they're living in a community which is their motherland. They not consider them, so they're living in Armenian territory. Like in Georgian Armenia, they're very difficult to confirm with their diaspora, coming back from wherever it's their home. It's why we need to look more, I think, more complex way about diaspora. Where is that? What kind of diaspora we're talking about? Who is coming back and who is leaving Armenia, and what the flow will be with this different group of people, young, old. We're talking about the repatriates of the old people retiring and coming back to their own motherland. We're talking about young people to see their career development in Armenia or not. I think it's very lot of discussion. This is why we're creating Future Studio, which you are part of this discussion, which is why we're doing this discussion about the future of Armenia 2041, which will be next step of the looking at 20 years ahead about what kind of Armenian world we can see it. I think also one important point I want to mention, we're talking about numbers, and it's quite challenging because we don't know all numbers correctly, but we're talking about overall the wealth of Armenian nation is around $200 billion, more or less. If you talk about, again, it's all not scientific. Talking with Armenian country with around $12 billion GDP. We're talking how much money we can concentrate for some of our projects and how much we can raise money for different things which we want to do it. And I think it's a peanuts compared to what we are achieving now, compared to what we can do it. And it's a question also what we're not doing right together, diaspora institutions with the government, and how we can do it better. I think it's become a very critical question, especially in a crisis time. Especially what we're talking about is social instability, especially what's happening now in the US or can happen in other parts of the world. Where these people will move again? It will go back to Armenia or go from US to Canada or to Uruguay. I think it's a waves of the people that were left Lebanon, they didn't come to Armenia in the 75 war, they went to Canada, to France, and it was the big wave of our US, and this was a big wave of people going again the new countries. So I think it's a crisis push us, I think, in a more serious discussion and also actions which needs to be done jointly to be sure we can really respond to this type of situation with a clear answer, what we're offering, what we can really do together, how we can help from diaspora to Armenia, how, like Mr. Ambassador said, also correctly, how Armenia can help the diasporans, because it needs to be mutual, dual street type of the approach, not the only one direction. But I think it's all things, I think it's crisis, the good part of the good news about the crisis is pushing all of us to become more concentrated about these issues and try to find answers quickly and not just talking in general about this. So I hope it will create more opportunities for discussion and decisions, and internally in Armenia, but also outside of Armenia. And I think we are facing interesting time for consider seriously about the future of Armenian nation in a new reality. The good news for all of us, and I think it was Nadia mentioned, I think the money becoming less important, the human capital, the human talent becoming more and more critical. It's a cost of entry to the business went down from last 20 years from $5 million to $500,000 because the capex is less important anymore. So I think it's giving opportunity for many Armenians to become again very valuable to creating new add value in different areas of the businesses, which we can really benefit to combining people that need to move fully into Armenia, but they can coordinate and cooperate again. So I will say it's interesting timing for all of us to talk about this. I think not in 1 hour, but more often and more seriously with different group of people. That will happen.
Yeah, excellent. Yes, you reminded me during the middle of the crisis, a young person on Facebook sent me a link about how all these various companies are moving towards working from home. And his point was to me saying, isn't this the perfect way to repatriate people? Let them work for the companies they were working for, but live in Armenia, right? And so there's this kind of conversation going on where people are sending us these ideas and these links.
I can bring a good example, Sarah. I can bring a good example. I am an investor in a company named VCV, which is doing human resource review in online. The owner of the company moved to Armenia, and he has branches in Japan, in US, and in Russia. And he operating from Armenia now, saying, why I need to be any part of this country? I can operate from Armenia. He bought the house and moved his headquarters to Armenia now, because he can manage us all with all time differences, all the challenges based in Armenia, of course.
Exactly. And so maybe in a sense, that is a bit of a silver lining of COVID. If it doesn't matter where you're working from, then what better place to do it than Armenia? Shall we go back to you, Mr. Sinanyan, on the repatriation question?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, or is it still?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's better.
So, I loved Ruben Vartanyan's response. I can only add on to it because it's pretty much gave a pretty comprehensive picture of where we're at, what we mean by repatriation. Unfortunately, a lot of folks have this linear kind of one-dimensional conception of repatriation. Okay, they bring the physical human being to Armenia, but then what? Without the jobs, without the infrastructure, without the educational infrastructure for folks that are coming here with, these are real people. These are real people with families, with children. You need to tend to their needs. We currently don't have the infrastructure to absorb a large number of repatriates. So to talk about repatriation, to plan for repatriation is a task that's going to take some serious work, serious consideration. Just recently, some political circles associated with the old government had written that the High Commissioner's office has given up on the idea of repatriation. Nothing could be further from the truth. What we've said is that we want to work on the infrastructure for repatriation. We want to have a concept of repatriation that's lasting, that's meant to keep people in Armenia, and not to bring them here and then have them move on to a third country. That's very unproductive. You need legal infrastructure, you need economic infrastructure, jobs. It's all about the jobs. You need even the cultural, educational infrastructure. You need people in Armenia to be mentally prepared for an influx of a large number of people that may be somewhat different from them. What COVID has done, as has been stated, is perhaps, we're not seeing it yet, but I think we will, accelerated this conversation, because we may be facing waves of repatriation, or at least an influx of people from the diaspora to Armenia that is not according to our plans. I mean, frankly, if the economic situation in Russia deteriorates, a lot of folks who had moved there in the last 20 years may have no better choice than to come back to Armenia. The goal is, how do you keep them there? How do you settle them there? What are our long-term plans? What are the resources we're willing to contribute to it? How fast can we develop the industry, the economy, to absorb these waves? And I'm using Russia just as one example. Again, we mentioned Lebanon, Iran. These are crises that have been ongoing, and we are on the cusp of something happening there too. So in other words, it's a double-edged sword. It's unfortunate what's happening. COVID is happening, and it's certainly it's depriving us of the financial means that we would otherwise have to perhaps deal with some aspects of repatriation, but also going to force us to face this issue, and I think have a more serious and more sincere commitment to repatriation. We'll see.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, it's already 9 p.m. Ambassador Nersessian, I see you unmuted yourself. Did you want to comment?
Just briefly, I think Ruben and Zara, they spoke about this issue extensively, and I don't have much to add, but I fully agree that repatriation is not a, very simple business to organize. But it's, of course, the return, they're welcomed. These are our brothers and sisters. The 35,000 people have returned, or prior the wave of the repatriation that our brothers and sisters from Syrian Armenian community who returned. This was the prior wave, prior to even pandemic that happened. And we were happy to discover that they changed a lot. They brought a lot of fresh air into Armenians' reality, into Armenian society. And definitely this new wave that is forced by COVID is going to bring a change as well. But the challenge is not this type of, the challenge is, of course, the long-term economic issue, is the social economic, because otherwise it can become a challenge if we don't find jobs for them. It can become a source of a social tension, of all kinds of societal issues. So we need to rapidly address this issue as Armenia, as diaspora. This is an opportunity to organize in a better and structured way repatriation, because repatriation is a fundamental issue for our country. We should bear in mind that the success stories of Soviet Armenia has to do largely also with the repatriation of 1945 and other waves of repatriation, when our brothers and sisters from Middle Eastern countries, from Greece, from European countries repatriated to Armenia and contributed to the modernization of Armenia. This was a huge boost, and this was a difference many people from Soviet Union were discovering when they were traveling to Armenia during those times. And in modern times as well, repatriation is a big opportunity for a development, leapfrog development for Armenia. But we need to address this issue in a very systematic way. We cannot afford people coming in Armenia and returning in desperation or disappointment. We need to make them happy. We need to create them opportunities for young people, especially, to find themselves in Armenia, not only spending a nice time around opera or in Northern Avenue, but also finding good jobs, educational opportunities, culturally expressing themselves, so that for our diaspora Armenian American community, diaspora community members, they discover themselves and realize their life dreams in Armenia. So this is what we need. But of course, a systematic approach, creation of jobs and economic opportunities. Thank you. Thank you for that, Sarah.
I know we are over our time, and I don't want to steal time from Nadia, but I want to offer Zara something which maybe will be useful to calculate. Not how many people repatriate, but how many companies headquarters being moved to Armenia, with better numbers for you to look. The other thing, I think we need to look from $2 billion for average coming annually to Armenia from repatriated money. how much money was went to investment, how much money was used for the just providing the food and life stability to the families. I think this will be important. How we can convert this $2 billion annually coming to Armenia. Not only will go down because of the crisis, but how to convert this $2 billion, at least $500 million will go to investment, not to the wedding and baptizing kids and funerals. Because I think one of the biggest challenges we've been facing was diaspora-Armenian relationship. The most of the money was going to the, like I said, I'm sorry to use the word toilet, because people were eating and using for not reproducing the add value, but more. It's why the challenge is creating the job, converting the money from eating to investment, and how bring the headquarters of the businesses to Armenia, what needs to be done.
If I can add something onto that, those countries that have a proven record of repatriation or proven record of bringing their ethnic brethren to their countries, for example, Israel, have heavily engaged private foundations, non-governmental entities. And these entities are the ones that have really been instrumental in making repatriation possible. Of course, there's a major component of the government sort of giving, doing everything else, not necessarily coming up with the money, but and probably providing the sort of the political motivation for it. But there's a great role to be played by non-governmental entities, diasporan organizations that may be ideologically interested in repatriation and making this possible. Because I think realistically speaking, A, some things are better done by the private sector, even the nonprofits of the private sector. And B, Armenia may not have the means to do the volume and the quality of repatriation related work that needs to be done in the coming future.
Very good. Well, this has been an easy panel to moderate since the panelists have been so full of interesting ideas and feedback. There are many, many, many questions and comments we simply didn't get to. So my apologies to our global audience, our global listeners, that we just didn't get to your comments and questions. I will note that looking at it, I see how diverse it is. People from St. Petersburg and Canada and Houston, Texas is saying hello. And I'm sure if I scroll up, there are many, many other places where our brothers and sisters in the diaspora are saying hello to us. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. Varujan Nersisyan, Ruben Vartanian, Nadia Gorzunian, Zare Sinanian. Thank you, FAST. Thank you, Future Studios. It's been a pleasure.
And
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.